game that we've got as one of our showcase games over in a cabinet over there is joining us by way of China via New York. Please put your hands together for Mr. Justin Ma.
Hello, everybody. So as a first warning, I don't have too much experience with public speaking, so you have to pardon me. And also, this is sort of thrown together, so if you want to interrupt me with any sort of questions or anything, I really don't mind. It's not a very organized talk. So first, I can give a little intro on the game, in case you don't know it. It is we call it a spaceship simulation roguelike-like. It's basically the goal was to recreate the feeling of Firefly or Star Trek, where you really feel like you're in the command of the ship. There's a lot of space games that you can see. You can flying around. It's like a pilot simulation, whereas this game is more like a captain simulation. You actually see what happens when captain yells out, "There's a fire in the engine room. Send a maintenance crew. Put it out," etc. That sort of thing. So this game was made by two people at first. It was me, Justin, and Ma, hi, and my friend Matthew Davis, who is currently in China right now. We were both working at 2K China, a sort of insourcing studio for 2K games. And we were working on games we didn't really like that much, so we actually decided to break off and work on something that we were really feeling pretty passionately about. So this started as a prototype, and I don't have any of the early prototypes I can show you, but I can show you some of the UI and stuff later, which will give you a little bit of a feeling for that. And then so it was just a thing for fun that we're doing for a few months. And then we put it into a competition at IGF China and got as a finalist, and got some feedback from some developers. So we're thinking maybe this is actually viable as a commercial product. So we worked on it for a few more months, and then we ended up doing a Kickstarter. We ended up asking for $10,000 because we were mostly done with the game, about 3/4 done with the game, I would say, at that point. And so we just needed a little bit more money because we ran out of savings to pay our sound guy who had been working pro bono to do all the founding of a corporation and everything necessary to actually start selling the game. And it actually went absolutely nuts. Here is the funding for that month of the Kickstarter. Just as a bit of a reference, we launched this ours about a week after Double Fine launched theirs. So we were like right before the big storm of Kickstarter craziness. And you can see this spike right here is actually when Notch tweeted us, I think. But yeah, so we had asked for $10,000 and at the end got about $200,000. So that was a pretty big sign that the niche market that we thought we were designing for may not be so niche. And since then, we did that Kickstarter this year in GDC time, and our biggest goal, like the highest aspiration of this game, would be if we can get it on Steam initially. That would just be like pie in the sky sort of stuff. And Valve actually approached us after this Kickstarter, which was during the IGF, and we had we had the game being shown at GDC on the floor through OnLive's indie, I forgot what it was called, indie arcade festival thing. And so Valve actually ended up contacting us, and we were able to get our beta onto Steam because they were interested in the game and the Kickstarter. So basically, this whole development process was a series of perfectly timed near mistakes, just lots of just perfect timing. So to let you see the game, in case you haven't seen it yet, I know some of you have. I'm not sure if the full screen's going to work with the thing. Okay, so let's see, do I have anything unlocked? Yeah, okay. So with this game, this is the hangar where you select which ship you want, and you unlock them over time. And a lot of the people, the biggest draw would be to rename their ships and rename their crew and become attached, and only to see them all die in violent ways. So like one person put it nicely that you can rename your crew, but you shouldn't because you'll just get attached, and that's a bad thing. So, like I've said before, this is a roguelike I'm calling, which basically means we're not claiming it's a roguelike because that community is particularly touchy, but it has elements of roguelike such as permadeath, extreme difficulty, an end game that you can only dream about reaching, and lots of procedural generated randomness. And it's also another way is that you can pause the game at any time and really think about giving orders and everything. So it's a little high tension, but you have freedom of how you want to approach it. So this is the game view. It's a cross section of your ship at all times, basically. These down here are your different systems on the ship, and these are the subsystems, which the only difference is they don't require power directly. Over here is the reactor. So each one of these green bars is one unit of power. So if I turn on the shields, the shield bubble will go on, and that sort of thing. These are the weapons that we have on the ship currently. So there's a pretty strong sense of power management, where if you get too many sort of systems and everything going on, you have to manage based on what's happening at the time. So this is the map of the game. It's a randomly generated sort of series of nodes that you can jump to, and as per the namesake, you faster than light travel, a la Battlestar Galactica style there. And at each node you receive a text event. These sort of, and like we took some inspiration from like King Arthur 2, where we found out that those really old choose your own adventure style options are actually still relevant and fun in my mind. So these events are totally random, and they can include things where you have a lot of choices about what happens, and those choices will affect, but it's all text based. There's no real explanation other than that, like visual or otherwise. So right now this is the basic premise is you're trying to outrun the Rebel fleet. And you are the last hope of the Federation, the Galactic Federation. And so we intentionally kept the storyline very vague. And so we more create a scenario, a setting, than actual story, because we didn't want to detract from the sort of projecting of the player's views onto the game. So if you want to pretend that you're actually the bad guys and you're trying to help save the bad guys, we never actually clarify that you're the good guys, for example. So this is a combat view. Here's another ship that's just arbitrarily flying around space. And so because the positional doesn't matter at all, it almost becomes like a game of two-player Tetris, where you're focused entirely on what's going on in the interior of the ship. So, for example, their ships all function the exact same way as yours do. You have systems, which correspond to rooms, crew members, which operate little computers to improve the system. If something gets damaged, they keep missing me, but here, for example, my shields just went down, and so now I need to send people over there and repair it. Otherwise, this beam drone is just going to tear me a new one. But if I launch a missile like that and I hit their beam drone system, the drone itself shuts down. And he's tearing me up. But yeah, he was also trying to warn the fleet, so he jumped away if we read the text. But yeah, so everything about the control is really simplistic. But, it's room-based movement. You don't tell your crew what they do. They just automatically do it there. All the power and everything is super simple. But that was one of our really core design principles early on, was that because this is a ton of information that could be going on at one time, and we try to make everything as simple as possible. And also, but there are other sort of complex mechanics going on. So, for example, there's fires going on. I could have people putting it out, and then afterwards they'll repair the system. Or if I wanted to, I could vent the airlock, and then that will vent the oxygen as this color change shows. And now the fire will get put out, for example. So you could do other complicated stuff like upgrade your doors to be blast doors, so when enemies teleport on top of your ship, you can lock them out and have no oxygen, they slowly die. Or you could throw bombs, you could throw a firebomb into your own ship and light them on fire and that sort of thing as well. So let me see if I could just get some sort of text-based thing to show you as well. All right, well, pretty simple. Like, this guy is asking to be brought somewhere, and so there's these mini quests as well, and lots of like mini stories that are kind of like trying to recreate an episode of Star Trek in one little 5-minute go. And just to give you a sort of a contrast to how complicated the game gets, let me run this. So I mentioned permadeath, but yeah, so there's no way to save the game and continue it. So every time that something slightly goes wrong, there's a little bit more sense of permanence and importance to your decisions, because literally you could be having the best run ever, and then you open your door once put out one fire, and then a series of damage just dooms your ship, and you feel like a jerk, like feel for killing all your people. Okay, so it seems to be a little bit more blurry, but whatever. So now this is the same ship, but at the very end game state, very close to the end. I just want to show you how complex it could get. Let me just... So I have a couple other systems on here. One is cloaking with dodging. You have a teleporter, which lets me board. I'll send some crew on an enemy ship if I get it. There's a drone system, which was like that little flying thing that shot me before. I could also mention the music. You may have noticed that, so one of the things we did with the Kickstarter money was give our music guy a lot of funds to be able to quit some of his jobs and just focus on making music for a while. And so one thing we came up with is a sort of dynamic music. It's very, very simplistic. There's 2 layers of tracks for each song, and it picks up in intensity when you get in a fight and when you're sort of exploring, and it's calm and calms down. And most people don't even notice it, but they just say how it makes you feel like it's responding to you, or it just feels like everything's timed right, even though they don't know what's going on exactly. So here, for example, this alien race are the Mantis. They're sort of a warlike alien that's taking over. Here's an example. So they teleported in a bad spot right next to my rear airlocks. I can just open the door and they'll have trouble. They'll be taking damage as they try and break down the doors. So I also have, for example, this boarding drone, which if I turn it on will launch this little combat guy, which will then crash through his hull and leave a hull breach and run around on his ship and attack them and such. So I'm just going to do a little bit of micromanagement here, show you. So I'm going to teleport these guys over onto their ship to try and take out that med bay before they have a chance to use it. What the heck? All right. So these, I won't explain it all because it's pretty complicated, but yeah, you get the picture at least. So here's my crew on board their ship fighting their guys, but they're just going to heal up the same way we can heal up, so it's going to be not a particularly great situation. I lost a guy. Anyway, so you get the basic picture. It gets pretty hectic, which is what I love about the game. I can still find new tactics and things every time I play it and that sort of thing. But yeah, so and one other thing I could show within the game is there was the secret ship. But yeah, so we consciously, like this game, it could be so expandable. Very early on, we felt like you could do so much with this game. You could have stations that you send your people on and board, like StarCraft 1. You can have like giant ships versus small ships and fighters, and you can do anything you want. So early on, we made the conscious decision to really try and limit it and make it be really sleek and slim at first. So like we have a lot of other ideas for systems and all that kind of thing, but what we tried to do with this release version of the game is take everything that we had at the time and find every possible use for it. So each one of these ships that you can unlock sort of focuses on different elements of the gameplay. Like this one is focusing on being a boarding ship, and this one's focusing on being entirely drone-based. And so we're just trying to partially because we weren't going to allow customization for reasons I can get into later, but we wanted to make it feel like every type of gameplay could be achieved from these starting ships. I guess that's enough of the actual game. So I personally, what I did, Matthew did all of the programming, and the game, excuse me. Matthew did all the programming, and the core game idea of wanting to make this captain simulation was his as well. And what I did was I did all the art, and I have a game design background, so we sort of worked together to do all the game design specifics. So I guess I'll talk about a little bit of the progression in the art style, because that's what I know best about the game, I suppose. And so this was like the first sketch that we had of something about the game, which is you could see it's a very different style. It was meaning the rooms are all randomly shaped, and we didn't even know what the game would be like. Would you have food? Would you have to worry about morale? Would you have to worry about people sabotaging or mutiny and all that kind of stuff, and or like generally sleeping quarters? So this was the first attempt at figuring out just what would it look like if you looked at a cross-section of a ship for the entirety of the game. So from this, we played with a few ideas of basically if you were looking at a command console and you were actually looking at warnings of the ship, or if you actually could cycle through ship layers and could see the people. And so we're playing with a lot of different ideas in this very early state last year. This was the first sketch of the Kestrel, you could say. Basically, I love doing these sort of mechanically drawings, and so I really like the idea of seeing the interior of the ship and seeing when you lose power, you see the power lines around the ship that get broken, and you see the fan shut off if you're losing oxygen. And obviously that was a little bit too ambitious, but I don't think there would have been any way for us to make this game complete, but this was still sort of early on, pie in the sky, sort of evaluating of what we wanted the game to be like. So this sketch then, what that turned into, this was the first version of the Kestrel. I had never really done pixel art based stuff before, so this one ship took me like a week, as opposed to later when I had to churn out ships and it would have to be like within 2 a day sort of timing. So this was really trying to find out how to actually draw pixel art. And so you could see on the interior of the ship as well, we started out very ambitious, you could say. Like, you could see by the airlock there's space suits so people can do spacewalks. None of that's possible. I was picturing, animating them sitting in the captain's chair and things going on. When systems get damaged, the oxygen thing starts breaking out, or they man the little gunner seat in the weapons room, a really complicated looking engine, etc. So all that was just some interesting background on what we abandoned, I guess. And then here was the first, basically the reason why we couldn't use this at all was because almost arbitrarily we decided on a set aspect ratio, and because of pixel art, there's no way you could zoom in or zoom out and smoothly. We had to really have everything fit smoothly and perfectly in the game. So we opted for this smaller size of the ship. This was where I took this into this shrunken down, more clean size. And then this was the final shading that we used in the game, which also had some glow as well. And also, just as a point of comparison, there were 3 ships that I started out with first. This one, which I affectionately call the Jelly Croissant. It was this and the 2 Rebel ships were our first ships that we worked on, that I worked on in the game other than the player ship. And as you can see, it was also remarkably large and more detailed than it would have needed to be in the final game. And then so this is the same version that's in the game now, or after a color change to, because this is for one of the alien races, which is a psychic slug race that are thieves and merchants and that kind of thing. So then here is a first sketch of one of the Rebel ships. And here it is in its large incarnation, shrunken down. And eventually, this style, because these were the first ships, and I really was learning how to do pixel art, and like the shading and the colors weren't particularly standoutish. And once I started adding more and more ships, I just kept going in this cycle of everything newer looked better than everything older. And like more than once I had to like redo everything old to sort of update it to the final style. So this is the look that the Rebels used in the final game. So same thing with the original long version, smaller, and then I tried to keep the same mechanics of the wing-based design, but with more feeling of 3D and angles and everything like that. So just in case anyone's curious, a little bit how I draw the ships themselves. Generally, I start with pen sketches of just doodling, no real intention at all at first. And so like this, you'll see in a little bit later, and like this type as well. So I just doodle and find weird little shapes and things, and I try and come up with a specific style for a ship. So that this is then how I would create the ship for pixel art style. I would take one of those sketches. I wouldn't scan it or and retrace it or anything, but I just sort of go for color blocks actually. And here is a version of this ship. This is the one of the alien race's ships that you can unlock for the player, which is a more organic, sort of thrown together style ship rather than asymmetrical instead of symmetrical, etc. And so here is just the doodling. Then I outline it, color, although the pixels are kind of weirdly zooming in on this. Color it in and then work with the final shading for the final version. And so I guess I'll talk a little bit about the UI. This was the first mock-up of the UI in the game whatsoever. You could see we were considering having crew portraits. This is with that original Kestrel drawing with the really large layout. And so even from this, it's kind of interesting because the progression of the design of the UI almost mirrors our design of the game perfectly, because we were as we were still deciding what the game would be. The UI itself, the sort of evolved as well to adapt to that idea. So with this first one, you could already tell that we wanted really basic units of power management, although we were thinking that instead of upgrading your reactor, you could have the ability to overcharge it, which would then, if you do it for too long, could damage the system, that sort of thing. And you could see really simplistic icons. So then here it is once I have the first pixel art version of the Kestrel, and also playing with the ideas that I mentioned of having it be almost like computer consoles. That was abandoned pretty quickly, but it's still interesting to look at, I think. But yeah, so I already opted down to shrink down the power management and everything to try and cram more in the screen, as we were realizing actually how much we would need to show during the game. Here it is a little bit later, as I was trying to figure out the sort of art style for the UI. You could see my obsession with glowing lines stayed true from this stage. And you could also see that it was months until I figured out what the heck a sensor system symbol should be. But so already we were sort of abandoning the sort of blocky look for a more sleek line sort of thing. This was when I was really pushing for the idea of having multiple ships and having to be able to cycle through them. So for example, this would be representing one ship that had two tiny fighters, two-room fighters that would be flying around helping him. We're actually having a lot of trouble figuring out how to represent the fact that we knew that the power had to be in concrete units, but some things were of such higher priority than other things, like shields. How do you compare that to the ability to open your doors? I mean, you need your shields at all times, basically. So we're playing with a lot of different ideas. Here you can see we're trying to clump them together to make it visually obvious that you need two engines to run the thing, and then you could boost it past that if you wanted. But a lot of that was streamlined, although we did keep the shield being 2 bars for each thing itself. here is once we realized that we had to shrink the ship, so we used the old ship in that style, and more trying to figure out how to represent the power display. One other idea that's not shown here, but you could expand this and shrink it, and you could also, we were also playing with the idea of not having to control the power management, because we thought it would be too complex for people. So we were thinking that you put it in a sort of specific, you put it in aggressive mode or passive mode or maintenance mode or something like that. So it can be automated if you really want to. But then eventually we abandoned that because it's just really fun to sort of have to manage your power in addition to managing your crew. And you can also see the croissant's first sketch over here. It's kind of cute. Actually, one other thing that I wish I had a prototype to show you, but we also were playing with the idea of the spatial. This is after we decided that there'd be no spatial-based movement. And that was actually a big turning point in the design of the game, because beforehand we were taking a lot of inspiration from like Weird Worlds, if anyone has played that, where we loved that game's exploration, but we absolutely hated the combat, or at least I did. And so we were thinking of having the two ships or multiple ships be in a 2D plane, and then you'd be able to zoom in on your ship, move your crew, zoom out. Weapons would be based, you have forward-firing weapons, side-firing weapons. Shields were based like X-Wing versus TIE Fighter style in specific areas of the ship. So all that, like, if you think the game is complicated now, you should have played it back then. It was absolutely insane. Like, there was no way anyone could manage all that stuff. But it was still pretty fun in some ways. But so eventually we adopted for the static view, just so that, because we decided we had to focus on, this is a crew management game. This is a ship and crew management game. So we just abandoned any sense of movement. Here it is actually pretty close to the current incarnation of the UI, but before I had the smaller version of the ship, obviously. And then here it is, just as for sake of comparison, in the current released version of the game. You can see the subsystems got a smaller box. We abandoned portraits, but just showed the people. Ideally, it was in our plan to have sort of color swaps for all the different aliens, and male, female maybe as well. So we was with the intention of being able to show more variety, but instead it's pretty simplistic right now. So that's the UI, or the art style. I have more than enough time, so I can just show you some of the other random things that I have on my computer, basically. So here's a couple ships that I liked but didn't make it into the game. And I think I totally abandoned these, but I like their style. And here's one that's kind of Gradius inspired. I think that's cool. So as I was saying before, with the zoomed in cockpit style, or the zoomed in focus on the rooms, I really wanted, once I decided to go pixel art, I really wanted to go full on pixel art craziness. And so like, here is a zoomed in version of the cockpit, and then here it is once you shut off power on the ship and go silent as you're trying to sneak by the rebel guys so they can't notice your power signatures, etc. And then here it is like if the engines go off and there's a warning light going on. So for obvious reasons, if we tried to go this way, the game would have taken years and years, but so abandoned that pretty early. You may notice I actually use, oh, that looks awful. Okay, well, pretend it's nice looking. So I actually use Game Maker for a lot of the prototyping because I did have a little bit of programming experience, but I can't say I'm very good at programming. And when I was working at 2K, I would actually go home at night and then just straight work on more video game prototypes using Game Maker just all the time. And we'd doing game jams always in Game Maker because it's a very, if anyone wants to try and make a game who doesn't feel comfortable, it's a $25 program, is absolutely amazing. You could do so much stuff with it. And so anyways, I make the all the little prototypes of art prototypes, and I'd send it to Matt, and he'd figure out how to do it in a real man's coding language. So here's the hangar view that I wanted in the game. You could see it in the customization screen, but you can't see the whole thing because it's blocked by the UI. I also wanted it so that the ship would be here, and when you launch and start the game, you sort of Gradius style, the hangar doors open, the ship drops out and goes pew. But Matt's influence was that he absolutely hated anything that prevents you from getting into the game faster, which is why there's no screens. There's just a loading bar, and then there's just a click, and there's no like any sort of animation or introduction or anything. Is more Matt's influence. So I didn't show it in the game, but if you haven't played it, the one other thing that you could discover in each of the areas is a sort of environmental dangers. So that you'll be in an asteroid field, and what that means is asteroids will be pelting your shields as well as the enemy. Or you can be in you could be really too close to a sun, which will have solar flares periodically, which lights your ship on fire, even more so if you have your shields down. And I think that's the bane of every player's existence when they first start is the solar flares, because literally the first time you see it, you're just going to die by fire. And one of the other things was a nebula, which sort of messes up your ship's sensors. And I have a feeling this isn't going to look pixel perfect as well. But I also really like the idea of having the UI itself not feel so perfect and not feel so solid. So I really wanted to play with having someone hack into your UI and having the UI get all buggy, or like this would be when your sensors go down, stuff just starts flickering, and you're having, like, it would still work, but you're having trouble managing your systems and all that kind of thing. I thought that would be particularly fun. But as with most things, we prioritized shipping the product, quote unquote, over just sort of, unfortunately, over realizing what it could have been, which we hope to at least continue on with. Here is something else I was considering, because many of you may see it. Well, Splunky is one of my favorite games of all time, and it was actually a pretty big inspiration for this game, largely in the pacing and the structure sort of elements. So this was when I was considering to, every time you jump between sectors, you would get a score screen, and it would look like you're actually going to hyperspace rather than just a Battlestar Galactica super fast transition. But we decided it would be a little bit too awkward and game feel breaking to just throw you into a score mode when it seems like a lot of people really, really get absorbed into the characters and their personal stories and that kind of thing. So just it's also squished, but I just wanted to say that this opening that we did for the video, or the closing rather, this was also done in GameMaker, because I have no idea how to use video editing tools, but like, so I just find it so funny that I had to use a game development tool to make video art. I find that interesting. Here's my little pixel art people test. Here's everybody dying over and over for doing all the art and stuff. The slugs were going to have a slime trail. I was even picturing it like making people slow down if they walk into it. Also, I really like the idea of having more atmosphere elements to the game. So when you say you're at a space station, actually show the space station. If you're saying you're at an asteroid with a mining station, show it. But like most things, we abandoned all the polish for the gameplay, so none of that made it into the game. Other examples of that is I wanted more art itself. So here's my mock-up of the NG race, which are robotic in nature, but this is unfinished. But yeah, but they are nano technology-based things. So each one is a hive of aliens. So I was trying to show that the fact that they could just construct themselves. And I was also playing with the idea of having little vignettes sort of for each of the events, so you could see a little bit of what would be going on. So, and they would have to be sort of modular. So the asteroids here would have to be able to be replaced with a small station, or the ship here has to be replaced with I don't know, a whole fleet or something like that. And as with most things, there just wasn't enough time. Also, I don't even think if it would add that much to the game because, frankly, people already complain about the I don't know, thousands of events we have in the game being too few, and the fact that they get them repeatedly. And I mean, we even hired a writer to help us part-time just work on these events constantly, and there's still not enough for people. So I really assume that were we to put art, they would get really old really fast. So it's probably better that we didn't. And I guess that is about it for what I can show you right now. If you guys have questions at all, I am open.
I'm really interested in the jump you had from the $10,000 goal to the $200,000 result. You mentioned that you spent a lot of that money and kind of devoted it towards music. What else do you feel like really benefited the most from that surge in cash?
So when we first started the Kickstarter, we also gave a release date for the game that was only a few months away. So just as a preface, like, unlike a lot of these games who start their Kickstarters, we had a timeline and we are almost done with the game. So we didn't have the luxury of saying, okay, 10 times the amount of money, we're going to hire 3 more people and work for twice the amount of time. So ideally, I would want all that money to be shoved into the game, but we tried to work a balance between using that money for the release and using it and also releasing on time. So we ended up releasing a month later than our estimated date, but I think we were pretty successful in that at least. So there was still some of the money left over, which we were intending to use for future development and updates and free updates and working on bigger DLC or something like that as well. But more specifically, it allowed us, like I said, to hire a writer as well. We got a lot more money for our sound guy, Ben Prunty. We were able to license a bunch of tools that we weren't planning on using, but that made our lives easier. And I think the biggest impact was the fact that we were able to run a very successful beta. So we were only expecting like 100, 200 people in the beta, but we actually got 4,000. So early on, we were really worried about being able to support them and have constructive feedback and a dialogue and all that kind of thing. And so it helped, having the extra funds helped us really make that a smooth process, and it actually made the game considerably better. It was due to the beta. In some ways that are less obvious than others. For example, there's a number of things that I was planning on spending considerable amount of time on the game, but no one in the beta ever mentioned it as a problem, even though I thought it would be. For example, there's like 5 backgrounds in the game. That was my test run for trying to make a background before I make all the backgrounds I was planning, but no one ever mentioned it. No one ever mentioned the fact that there was 5 planets. And so these are things that we would have spent time on had we not got that sort of opposite of feedback, the lack of feedback in that regard.
That's cool. There's a question from the audience here.
So you mentioned putting some of the money towards DLC or something like that. Are there any plans to either update the game or release like a new version that has like another mode or more scenarios or something?
So we're in the process of discussing it, because like with the Kickstarter, maybe we're just chronic underestimators, but we got a lot more response than we thought. So we're gonna have to evaluate our plans. I personally would love to continue to update the game. Maybe not for Minecraft style years and years, but there's a lot of things that we could easily add into the game that I want to. But I won't lie, Matt is pretty burnt out right now as the only programmer trying to have a simultaneous release on Linux, Windows, and Mac. He's pretty burnt out, and he's going to need some time for a break. But in the meantime, there are things that I could personally add if once I get an opportunity to. Just the easiest of all those is just more and more events. But yeah.
Any other FTL questions or just questions about Justin's private life.
I had a question about, you mentioned a lot of the systems would be customizable. Is there any thought about opening that up to the community, a la Minecraft or Skyrim's customization options?
Well, just before I answer that, just to give full disclosure, initially we did have a customization thing. The hangar was meant to be a customization, sort of like a tabletop RPG where you get build points and you use those build points to get crew and system upgrades and weapons and that sort of thing. And we had that running and we were playing around with it for a long time, and we eventually gave up on it because we ran into a design problem where if we wanted to start the player out at a low enough level so that those early fights are still interesting when you only have one weapon, two weapons, then the amount of customization you can have in the beginning is so minimal that it's not fun at all. But if we give you enough for an interesting customization, being able to say, I want cloaking and bombs, or that sort of thing, then you wouldn't have enough. If we gave you the freedom to do that, you miss out on the whole beginning thing, and it's way too easy for ships to be overpowered. And early on, we also decided that we don't want to allow the player to choose their own ship layout and systems layout because it is super easy to min-max it. It's meaning there are just certain things that work so much better than others that I wanted those ships where your med bay is all the way across the room from your door system, and now you're screwed because both are on fire. And I really wanted those awkward situations, and if we gave the player full customization, you wouldn't run into them as frequently. In terms of opening it up, mod style, this is another thing. Ideally, I'm fully in support of modding, and I love it. And ideally, I would love for our game to be modded, just all the time. But Matt may disagree. But we never prepared the game to be made that way. Meaning, early on, if you have to early on make that decision, and you have to structure all of the components of the game with that in mind, with that anticipated. And we didn't do that for whatever reason. So right now, there are a number of people modding it, and they've already figured out how to make their own ships and stuff. And I'm going to have to make a official response on this. The game, I didn't mention it, but the game was released Friday, so a week ago. So it's been pretty hectic week and pretty exciting, and we're still responding to a lot of what's the response and everything. So in terms of modding, I feel like I cannot support it as it is right now because the way they use modding, it requires you to send all of the data files, which includes the art and the music and the writing and everything. And I cannot condone that. So until we figure out a way to have mods that don't require that, I can't fully support it. But once we do have that, I would be all for allowing people to mod it in the ways that you can, which are pretty limited. You can make your own events, so you can make your own scenarios. You could kind of make your own weapons. You can't make anything new, but you can manipulate what's there. You can have ships, make new ships, but that's about it. So in that limited way, I will help people along as much as I can once we resolve the whole data issue.
We're about out of time. Are you going to be able to stick around and hang out with and talk to people and answer more questions at the booth this afternoon?
Yeah, sure. I'll be here all afternoon, all day, I guess.
Excellent. Well, you said earlier you weren't confident in your public speaking skills. This panel was excellent. Thank you so much for coming to Fantastic Arcade and for doing such a great direct developers commentary. We appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody.
Keep it going for Justin Ma for FTL, y'all.